I'd like to introduce the chair for the next session. That's Dr. Alpana Dave. She is a research manager at NIBMG and she's also an India Alliance RM fellow. So I think a lot of Alpana's work involves facilitating and supporting large multi-stakeholder programs, the nature of science at her institution. So who better than Alpana to chair this session? Over to you, Alpana.
Thank you, Savita. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So welcome everyone to our next session today, and we again have three wonderful speakers in this session. So our first speaker today is Dr. Radhita Baral. She is a scientist by training with a background in molecular biology. She's presently working at CSIR IGIB as a project scientist, and where she is working towards enriching their institutional international research and collaboration profile as India Alliance RM Fellow. She is passionate about research management, which she believes is all about the skills, the opportunities, and working in the critical space between different research units. So on a personal note, Dr. Baral has also been really helpful whenever I've reached out to her. So today her talk is going to be about the Beyond Research webinar series that she has initiated. Our second speaker today is Dr. Kamal Gulati. Dr. Gulati holds a PhD in healthcare management and is working as Scientist C at AIIMS New Delhi. He has played a key role in the planning and execution of several multicentric research projects funded by both national and international agencies, such as UKMRC, ICMR, DBT, etc. And one of the most notable one is the multicentric population-based cohort, which is a collaborative effort between AIIMS and Erasmus University Medical Center in Netherlands, which is a multi-crore project. So his talk is going to be about his learnings from a large population-based prospective cohort study that he has been a part of. And our third speaker for this session is Dr. Priyanki Shah. Dr. Shah is a project manager at the Pune Knowledge Cluster. Her academic background is in microbiology and molecular medicine, and she has more than 10 years of experience in the field of research management in both academia and industry. She's worked with institutes such as the World Bank, University of Sheffield, and with companies such as Quintals and IG Stratford. She believes that we need to have more trained staff and an increasing awareness among researchers about the benefits of research management. So can't agree more with you, Priyanki. Her talk today is going to be about her experience with setting up a COVID-19 surveillance group at PKC. So on that note, we'll start request the India Alliance staff to please play the videos.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here today for being a part of the IRMI Annual Conference. I appreciate India Alliance and IRMI for its continued interest and leading ventures in the Indian research management ecosystem. I am Radhita Baral, currently working as a DBT Wellcome Research Management Fellow at the Institute of Genomics and Integrative Biology. A very brief introduction about myself. Trained as a scientist, I decided to pursue my career as a research facilitator. I have worked in different capacities in different kinds of organizations and hence got to understand the requirements of research support from government, industry, and institutional perspective. And in the process, developed more clarity with respect to the roles, responsibility, and challenges in this profession. Today, I'm going to speak to you about the importance of building sustainable funder partnerships. Let me quickly share my slides here. In today's highly and smartly connected world, it is pretty easy to form associates and networks. But achieving productive value, creating collaborations or associations is not easy at all. It is important to work towards increasing the effectiveness and efficacy of any kind of association. Every research organization has a myriad of partners and associations. Some of them might be stakeholders and others might be limited interactions. It becomes important here to gauge what is their motivation or interest in the R&D ecosystem. Some of your partners help you build knowledge, some help you communicate, and others may help you outreach with public and the international ecosystem. And there may be others which facilitate compliance. Among these, one important association for any R&D institution is that of its funder. In today's era, funders are no longer limited in their role to merely evaluate and competitively award grants. The researcher funding agency associations are increasingly showing interest in application of research findings, in building up knowledge base, and in joint participation in supporting national and international overarching research goals. This follows exactly the pattern of collaborative research. Thus, it is important for an institute to understand the best possible way for increasing the effectiveness for its association with the donor agencies. For this purpose, crosstalk between the two is extremely necessary to create the synergy. Now, moving on to the stage of funding agency. How do they engage and identify institutes for supporting? When a trend in research occurs, funders will notice that there is a subsequent boost for requests for funding. But at the same time, they ensure their funding is appropriated to projects that are novel and are built upon previously funded research outcomes. A fine example of this process may be seen during the recent pandemic. The COVID crisis led to a deeper understanding and realization of international collaborations to develop solutions and to predict health threats for both the researchers and the funders. But beyond the technical solutions, there was a need for timely strategical investment in coronavirus related R&D in order to enhance the capabilities for managing this new uncertainty. So national programs were launched by government agencies and other federal agencies, but that was supported by the external funders who also joined in the effort. Consultations were held both in-house and sometimes jointly with other funders. The focus during this phase was on gathering the different views and experiences of research in the agency and those that were funded by the agency. This was to identify the issues that the strategy should address and of course any possible ways forward. The aim was to develop a strategy that would have wide support and that would be readily followed up and implemented by different groups and stakeholders. At this point, the relevant stakeholders and partners like government, non-government organizations, funding agencies, research institute, and industry were invited for their views on the research topic. Such an exercise identified the areas of success, the areas that needed the changes, and the areas which would be prioritized for future research. Learning from the pandemic effect in the extremely open research environment today, funders are raising and pooling money to support interdisciplinary research of complex questions. Thus, based on the set priorities, the call for funding opportunities are launched. This kind of coordination led to availability of an enriched portfolio of grants and funding entities. So it became now more important for the institution to understand the new funder strategies. And at the same time, platforms were needed to educate the funders about mutual synergies in futuristic context. Understanding an organization included knowing about the organizational goals and mandates, understanding its organization culture. Different organizations have different levels of flexibility and stringency in its functioning. And finally, knowing the people you will be interacting with or who will be associated and managing your research project. Undertaking the preferred modes of communication with them. So the main challenge now became the availability of appropriate information to both the institution and the funders about mutual mandates. Thus, a crosstalk between the two was necessary for creating these synergistic association. I'll cite a small example here. Intel is a software-based company, and IGIB is a genomics institute. During pandemic, IGIB was one of the pioneering institutions in India for genomic surveillance. Intel also committed funds for AIDS in pandemic diagnosis, treatment, and prevention. Following up on mutual mandates, IGIB and Intel entered into a collaboration and co-developed some very crucial leads in COVID research. The main idea to highlight here is that both the organizations identified each other through their work and mutual discussions for taking forward areas of mutual interest. However, all funders are different in terms of the level of contact they require from their grantees. Some do not prefer any contact and this should be also respected, whereas others work in a continuous communication mode. Some would like to meet weekly or bi-weekly or maybe monthly. It's important to understand and get the correct balance right in the early stages itself. Henceforth, planned communication can be pursued, which would be in line with the comfort of each funder individually. In any organization, this relationship has to be pursued at multiple levels. The senior leadership level alignment, as well as the technical and financial division cooperation is needed for the successful relationship building. Strong partnerships and engagement with major funders of research are an important area of focus for IGIB. Usually, the communications with the relevant program or portfolio managers of the funding agency are managed directly by the researchers. But building and nurturing relationship to develop stronger mutual associations is being done centrally by research support. Under the aegis of a program for effective documentation and management of multi-party academic initiatives, the institutional relationship with major funders are maintained in a coordinated manner. Strong and effective partnership with research funders are supported through a couple of strategies. Firstly, developing and understanding strategic thinking and priorities of both the organizations. This is facilitated by an effective dialogue between senior level at both the organizations. Secondly, by coordinating the institute's response to research funder initiatives that require institutional input. Identifying the institutional priorities and development of institutional knowledge, like through responses to consultations and information requests and similar activities. The next would be to ensure continued interaction by organizing regular visits and managing and supporting the interactions. And finally, through information sharing, ensuring that there is an effective communication and information sharing and dissemination between the two institutes. For example, all funders have policies about gathering information and sharing data. These need to be meticulously understood, especially in relation to open access and publication policies. Funders want to know what's happening in the projects and programs that they are supporting without any surprises. Communicate both challenges and successes to keep the funders updated and allow for feedback and input if things aren't going according to the plan. So there is no one-size-fits-all solution to managing relationship with funders. Context and grant-making systems vary dramatically and change constantly. Thus, a continuous process for strengthening grantee and funder relationship needs to be pursued, which will lead to, of course, effective grant making and fruitful research. One of the initiatives which IGIB has launched to bring together the researchers and funding agencies is that by launching the Beyond Research webinar series. In this series, we invite people from different organizations or fields who support research to give a talk. We focus on the successful ventures and opportunities in Indian context. It's aimed to understand the wide arena of opportunities available globally and how these opportunities are implemented on the ground. Of course, in this journey are the partners who bring together countries and communities, the funders, the administrators, and the healthcare providers. There are partners who bridge the gap from bench to bedside, from planning to performance. Today's researchers are provided with funding, accessibility to expertise, collaborations with global researchers, and accessibility to infrastructure as resources. These kind of resources help us or enable us to undertake competitive research problems, increase the research output, and disseminate and make it accessible to public at large. In this webinar series, we usually invite representatives from such organizations who enable and provide opportunity to do value-added research. It is aimed to understand and increase awareness among the research community about the different research avenues and opportunities. Till now, we have had speakers from many enablers, including Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Foundation for Innovative New Diagnostics, PATH, the USA Agency for International Development, to mention a few. The webinar is open to all and happens once a month. The recordings are also made available through YouTube channel and is being developed as a resource for researcher and research managers. You're all welcome to attend these. With this, I come to the last slide of the presentation. And I would like to end by saying that being awarded a grant is only the beginning. In this competitive field, in addition to high quality proposals and reports, building a genuine relationship with your funders is essential to ensure that you stand out from the crowd and increase the likelihood of your relationship and continue this in the long term. I acknowledge CSIR-IGIB and IRMI for their support, and my contact details are given here. Thank you all.
Greetings, I am Dr. Kamal Gulati from the Centralized Core Research Facility of All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. And the topic which I am going to present today is Research Management Challenges in Setting Up a Large Population-Based Prospective Cohort Study in India, Learnings from the Lokarpan Cohort. India spends about 4.2% of its GDP on healthcare, and we spend less than 1% on research and development, which is the lowest amongst BRICS nations. Of this budget, we spend 39% on NCDs. It is estimated that between 2012 and 2030, India is going to lose 4.6 trillion US dollar due to non-communicable diseases. And therefore, population-based prospective cohort studies are important. However, they can yield vital new evidence. Though they are difficult to set up, especially in non-Western contexts such as India, as they entail no immediate patient care benefits and face uncertainty of public funding. So here we present our experience in establishing the Lokarpan cohort, which means dedicated to the public. So a few key points about the study. The aim of the study was to study incident stroke and dementia in adults more than or equal to 50 years of age in urban and rural populations in the northern India. The study was inspired by the Framingham Heart Study and the Rotterdam Cohort Study. It was funded by Department of Biotechnology and Department of Health Research. Funds were sanctioned to the tune of rupees 32 crores. Sample size was 15,000, 7,500 for urban and 7,500 for rural populations. There were 3 sites set up, one at AIIMS New Delhi, the second in the rural component, the CRHC Ballabgarh, and the third one for National Brain Research Center, Manesar. It was for 8 years period, 2014 to 2022. We collaborated with Erasmus University Medical Center, the Netherlands, and there were 26 investigators, out of which 24 were Indian and 2 were Dutch. Approximately 57 positions were sanctioned for the rural and the urban component of the study. The administrative structure of the study included management committee, events committee, and the international advisory committee. The management committee was chaired by the principal investigator, and it used to hold its meetings weekly, and in charges of urban site, rural site, and data management were also present, and it was assisted by the research manager. For the events committee, there were 2, neurological and the cardiac one, again assisted by the research manager, and the international advisory committee included Indian and Dutch PIs and PIs of Framingham Heart Study, Study of Health, and Austrian Stroke Prevention Study and Austrian Family Study, and it was also assisted by research managers. These committees used to meet weekly, quarterly, and biennially respectively. To mobilize knowledge and build capacity in the cohort study, several bilateral visits were made between Dutch and the Indian investigators to plan and operationalize this study in India. 2 Indian investigators completed their master level course in clinical epidemiology at the Erasmus University between 2017 and 2019, and 4 doctoral research students completed their research under this study. So there were research management challenges. So we have categorized them into 2 groups, pre-COVID and post-COVID. In the pre-COVID, the first challenge was the limited funding. Initially, there were no funds for the IT component, and we reappropriated some funds available in the consumable head to meet our IT requirements. There were no funds for the MRI machine, though this study needed a dedicated MRI machine. For GWAS, a separate grant was received from the Department of Health Research. The project was initially approved in February 2014, and the urban site at AIIMS made functional in July 2015. The rural site at CRHSP Ballabgarh was planned to initiate in 2015. However, funds were released after 2 years due to administrative reasons, and it could be made functional only in 2017. Getting space for the urban site at AIIMS was the major challenge. So we requested in 2012 space for the medical assessment site. However, it was allocated only in 2016. We estimated that 6,000 square feet will be required. However, we got only 1,800 square feet. Temporary arrangements in the meantime were made in a lab with 5 rooms, where we could assess 4 participants against the target of 12 per day. The site could be made fully functional from October 2016 after completion of the renovation. Further, the field office, we got 1 room in 1 ESI dispensary on loan basis, and our request for rental space was not considered by the funding agency. For the rural site at Ballabgarh, for medical assessment site, temporary arrangement was made in 5 rooms in the old OPD block, where we could assess only 4 participants against the target of 12 per day. Later, at a newly constructed building on the first floor with an area of 3,000 square feet, we set up our medical assessment site. However, it was on the first floor, but there was no lift, and our participants were elderly, which was again a separate challenge. For the field office was established in primary health centers as per the requirement. Procurement of machinery and equipment was a major challenge. For the urban site at AIIMS, we got a one-time grant of rupees 90 lakhs. However, interestingly, for the rural site, we got 10% less for the same types and the number of machines. So it compromised on the type and quality of machinery and equipment, and delays were also noted due to complex procurement process due to GEM portal and re-tendering of some of the important items. Human resource had 4 dimensions. There were inadequate number of types and posts. To limit the project cost, the funding agency reduced some key positions like data entry operator, physiotherapists, medical social workers, and non-availability of qualified staff. Since the positions were temporary with low salary and limited growth opportunities, hiring of qualified staff such as medical doctors at a salary of 60,000 per month was a major challenge. In addition to that, staff was unwilling to work in community, especially in the rural areas in Ballabgarh. The possible reasons were distance from the main city, poor transport and accommodation facility, and some security concerns for the female staff. Multitasking, since the number of positions were not adequate, so multitasking was required, and we trained our staff after due certification. However, this approach was often resented, and staff complained that this was not part of their job description and it was considered as an additional burden. The another major challenge was MRI. There was no dedicated MRI machine for the urban and rural sites. So MRI in our study was carried out on a 1.5 Tesla machine with very limited slots in a patient serving facility at AIMS in the late evening, weekends, and on holidays. However, as per global best practices, some similar MRI based studies such as German National Cohort, UK Biobank, and MRI shared study was using dedicated 3 Tesla MRI scanner. So because of this, we could do only 2,604 MRIs at the urban component of the project. For the rural component, there was no MRI facility and hence no MRI could be done there. For the IT component, we plan to collect initially we planned to collect data using paper questionnaire, and we never budgeted for computer servers, website, cloud storage, and manpower like programmer. Later, it was felt that the online data collection is very necessary to ensure the quality of the data being collected. So we sought support from the various government agencies, but we were unsuccessful. We submitted requests to funding agencies for some funds for the IT component, and it took about 18 months to sanction, and the funds were insufficient, so we could not put a robust IT system in place. For regulatory approvals, PNDT registration was required for all ultrasound sonography machine with the designated district health authority, and we had echocardiography and carotid Doppler machines which needed registration. However, for the rural site, it took more than a year to receive the approval because of some strike happening in the rural component in the Ballabgarh district, and site could become fully operational only in 2019, which was the year 6 of the project. The next challenge was managing expectations of the study participants, as it was a community-based study and the research team. For the study participants, majority of the urban participants living in the Vasant Kunj area had government-funded free medical insurance, and these participants did not find any additional direct benefit. So persuading them to enroll in this epidemiological study was very difficult. They also sought detailed reports of medical assessments and consultations in various specialty departments of AIMS on a priority basis, unlike the Western countries, and we arranged more than 3,000 such consultations in the AIMS. For research teams, it was challenging to keep all investigators. There were more than 20 investigators, most of whom were clinicians and with no formal training in epidemiology. Engaging and motivating them in an epidemiological study was a big challenge for the research team. Further, interpersonal conflicts among research staff was also noted. So coming to the challenges during COVID pandemic, which happened in January 2020. So the first follow-up visit for the medical assessments was planned in February 2020. In July 2019, the urban site completed its phase 1 recruitment goal of 7,500 participants, and the International Advisory Committee and the principal investigator decided to initiate the first follow-up visit of urban site participants from February 2020. However, the first case of COVID was reported in India in January 2020, which prompted the government of India to issue various containment measures such as lockdown. Therefore, physical visits of participants to medical assessment site at AIMS could not take place, and follow-up data during this time we collected follow-up data telephonically. The MRI was discontinued because it was being done at a patient care serving facility at AIMS, and AIMS suspended all non-emergency MRIs, and MRIs for urban component at AIMS of Lokarpan cohort were discontinued. So during 2015 and 2019, for the urban site, we could achieve the target of 7,500 participant, and out of this 505 participants, 6,010 participants consented for MRI brain scan, which was 80%. However, of this 6,010, we could do MRI brain scan of only 2,604 patients. The rural side did not work very efficiently, and we could recruit only 2,228 participants there. And no MRI could be done because there was no MRI machine or an in-house MRI facility in the Ballabgarh center. So February 2020, the Lokarpan cohort completed its 8-year period. It was further extended for 6 months, and it finally ended in August 2022. So now what are the learnings for the research managers, or what are the lessons learned while setting up this study in the Indian context? As we know that research management has 4 main domains like ideas or the project proposal, then getting it funded, managing the research project, and collaborations. So key learnings for the research managers are, first is building a research team which is motivated, committed and constructive. There should be regular interactions. Small groups should be assigned for specific work domains. As far as funding is concerned, funding should be adequate, timely release and long term. Multiple sources should be considered for these long term projects for its sustainability. Manpower should be adequate and suitably qualified. Regular training is very important. Reasonable pay and incentive and growth opportunities are critical for retention of the manpower in the research projects. Procurement of adequate funds, speedy procurement and flexible budget is very important for running these large studies in the Indian context. For field activities, there should be a coordinating office which is set up in the community itself. Networking with community through various awareness program or regular meeting with the RWAs. Doorstep services should be provided to the participants as well as some incentives to enroll in the study. For the medical assessment sites, adequate space should be provided and the MAS should be set up close to the community so that there is limited expenditure on the travel time and the other mode of transports. The staff should be courteous and motivated and the time should be managed well. Data should be collected using online system, so robust IT system should be in place. Multi-level supervision is required to ensure the quality, and centralized dedicated team for follow-up data should be put in place. Community engagement is very important, so conduct community programs to raise awareness and increase participation. Telephonic medical assistance should be provided and regular interactions should be held with the community representatives and the investigators. Communication, for this a centralized call center should be set up, online appointment system should be there and various other modes of communication can be explored. All applicable regulatory approvals should be taken well in time. Third party audit for data quality should be done and certification of personnel, process and instruments is very important. And for knowledge mobilization and the capacity building, the researchers should be trained at international collaborative sites, and for research capacity building, doctoral research in the project should be encouraged. So to conclude, the lessons are, it is critical to invest in large population based prospective cohort studies to generate research evidence about non-communicable diseases specific to the Indian population. Meticulous planning, adequate funding, recruitment of qualified manpower, web-based technologies and support from all stakeholders including government, institutions and community is critical. And considering the long-term sustainability for cohort studies, multiple funding sources should also be explored. And most importantly, research manager plays a key role in running and operationalizing these long-term large research projects, and their role is very important at all levels and functions of the project, right from beginning, that is administration and operations, to management and finally at leadership stage. A few publications from the study which can be accessed online, and hereby I acknowledge the support provided by AIIMS New Delhi, DBT, Department of Health Research, Erasmus Medical Center and DBT India Alliance for this study. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone. Hi, I'm Priyanki Shah and I represent Pune Knowledge Cluster. I'm here today to present to you our insights, experience and learnings from setting up a city-level surveillance in Pune. Let's start at the beginning. Every project at inception is built on an idea or in response to a need. Surveillance was the need of the hour. Project inception and manifestation of the virus happens simultaneously, leading to project realization. PKC as a cluster intends to serve as an incubator for larger long-term collaborations that can attract funding and partnership that result in the generation of significant research outputs. PKC recognized the need to track the virus by bringing together hospitals, labs, research organizations, and government. PKC was the anchor which supported the ecosystem that worked on mitigating the risk brought about by the virus. To keep abreast with the disease, we need to track the variants and understand its evolution in our population. Real-time sharing of these sequences to national and international platforms would enable the scientific community to access and analyze the sequences in real time. The project can be distinctly broken down into 4 phases: fundraising and consortium building, implementation of the project, management of the project, and the achievement and the impact of the project. I will talk about each step independently. Fundraising and building the consortium. Once the seed is sown and the idea is fixed, what do we do next? PKC and colleagues from other partner institutes came together to draft and conceptualize the study and look for funding that would enable their idea. The strength of the project lay in its strong defined outcomes. A large pan-India consortium consisting of 4 cities and 7 institutes were built. This was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. Independent of the consortium, we also raised funds at a local level through YRG, Pune Foundation, Poonawalla Foundation, Bajaj, and INSACOG. PKC wrote and managed the Rockefeller grant. However, the other grants were supported by PKC. PKC played a dual role. It was part of a bigger effort to build sequencing capacity in India and also build an alliance of collaborators in Pune to grow and increase sequencing capacity in Pune. PKC was part of a collaborative effort that managed to harmonize the coordination, collection, delivery, sequencing, and reporting of COVID samples in Pune. PKC built a pan-India consortium that consisted of educational institutes, government agencies, and international funding agencies, other funding research groups, research organizations, private and public hospitals, and laboratories. The next phase was implementation of the project. Which samples to collect? Prior to sequencing and sampling, we had to develop a sequencing strategy. For spatial representation, 300 to 400 samples were collected every week. We focused on clustered sampling to ensure reasonable precision for both low and high prevalence samples. Such methods allowed the generation of population-based estimates of the proportion of each circulating variant among SARS-CoV-2 infections. The sampling strategy was developed in collaboration with IISER Pune. We worked with the hospitals and labs to obtain the metadata. This metadata was then compiled by PKC and given to IISER to choose the samples to sequence. PKC coordinated with the sites to advise them on which samples should be stored as they would go for sequencing. The biggest constraint was the time and the quality of the metadata. Our learnings, time was critical in this step. Data must be cleaned and shared in real time, and selection of samples and relaying of this data back to the sites had to happen within 24 hours. To counteract fragmented data, we must establish data capturing modalities that ensure the standardization of data. Communication had to be crisp and precise. What type of samples do we collect and where do they go? Samples would either come as VTM or as RNA aliquots. To ensure maximum sample collection, we built capacity at a partner organization to help extract RNA from the VTM samples. Since BJ Medical was the nodal agency appointed by the state for sequencing, we ensured all the labs sent their samples to BJ. If the lab did not have the capacity to send the samples, PKC would arrange a pickup and further delivery of the samples to BJ. Once the RNA was extracted at BJ Medical, the samples were sent to one of the sequencing sites, NCL or IISER. NCL and IISER sequencing capacity was different. IISER could sequence 384 samples and NCL could sequence 96. This sequencing ability was different due to the different equipment used in the labs. Timelines had to include library prep and sequencing. This would take approximately 3 days. The biggest constraints were logistics and mapping of different timelines and sequencing ability. Our learnings, a thorough understanding of the sequencing process and the time it takes for sequencing. An effort had to be made to map each institute's sequencing capacity, their resources, their timelines, and their ability to deliver. Timelines and resources had to be flexible. Once we have the sequences, what do we do with them and what is their impact? The sequences were uploaded on national and international portals where the sequences could be studied and analyzed. The sequences were uploaded to GISAID, IGIB, IHIB, and INSACOG. Reports were prepared and shared with the government on a weekly basis to highlight the variant of interest and provide other variant information to them. Constraint. Data had to be made available to multiple stakeholders. Their data requirements were varied. Our learnings, data needed to be presented to address the goals of the audience. Project management. Convincing partners and stakeholders. The ability to convince partners to work at a quicker pace and a realization of immediate impact drove the participation in the project and the eagerness to do so. The implementation of this model was greatly facilitated by participant education that the data generated would benefit researchers, organization, and the whole community. We demonstrated that the realization of this project lay in adapting to the situations that were beyond our control. Confidentiality of the participants remained their partners' biggest concern. Adaptability of the partners and the stakeholders drove how the project took shape. We found that building partnership with research organizations and public hospitals were easier than private sector, which took a lot more convincing and handholding. Resource planning and management. Resource planning was the most difficult aspect of the project as the ability of human personnel to come to work would not be guaranteed. We always had to have a backup plan for all the resources. Streamlining processes, communication, scheduling, immediate reporting, and dissemination of information had to be planned effectively since all our partners were short-staffed and dealing with government restrictions. Communication. The use of easy communication tools with project personnel in our partner organizations gave the collaborators instant access to PKC for troubleshooting and relaying information. This directly translated into better management of the project. In a nutshell, PKC envisioned the pipeline and implementation, which included identification and selection of stakeholders, development of its communication strategy, sample acquisition and sampling strategy, maintenance of a data depository, dissemination of research results to the community, standardization of sample collection and data depository, fund management, and people management. Achievements and impacts. PKC facilitated the sequencing of over 15,000 samples in Pune from various partners. We sequenced around 5.8% of the total SARS-CoV-2 submitted to GISAID. PKC also facilitated the sequencing of 6.3% of all the samples submitted to INSACOG and 13% of all the samples submitted to IGIB. Maharashtra submitted 24,704 sequences to IGIB, of which approximately 50% were facilitated by PKC. These sequences were important indicators and potentially representative of the prevalent situation across the country. The variant knowledge driven through sequencing helped health officials and hospitals make decisions that impacted patients and citizens. PKC intends to leverage this network to manage and build surveillance systems for other diseases. In summary, the project helped us understand phases and tasks in research organizations overlap and are non-linear. This project was unique. The phases were interchangeable and deliverables and outcomes were ever-changing. The researchers did not have competing/other obligations, which led to quicker turnaround and more interest in the outcome of the project. To have a positive public health outcome, various health organizations had to work with the government to achieve a tangible and actionable outcome. I would like to leave you today with a thought I feel is very important to acknowledge when planning and building large research based consortium projects. The management of a research project is full of uncertainty and complexity. Research has substantial elements of creativity and innovation, and hence predicting the outcome of research in full is therefore difficult. Thank you.
Thank you to all the three speakers. Maybe right now I don't think there are any questions in the chat box. So I guess I'll just start with...
Alpana, sorry to interrupt, but maybe our speakers can just turn on their videos.
Yes, yes, of course. Yes. For
And
some
you
reason,
as well, Alpana.
No, I was trying that, but it's for some reason it's just not happening. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So Rajita, my first question to you: what is the starting point? How do you initiate that connect with a funder, with a new funding agency or a CSR, like an industry or anyone? So how do you start?
As I said, it's the earlier you start, the better it is. So, like whatever opportunity comes around to me for the first time, say any grant, any funder who is for the first time getting involved with IGIB, it's best to try and understand what their objectives are, what their long-term goals are, basically looking into their past funding ventures, their recent, they have, on their websites certain documentations about their regular brainstorming sessions, or what are their priorities, or what has been discussed, such kind of things, and the type of people they have already funded, as well as interacting with the person or the program manager who is over there, attending the weekly or the monthly meetings, and trying to gauge their further interest, going a step forward. I mean, that's basically how I do it. It's basically initiating conversations and carrying them further to the next level.
Right. Thank you. Kamal, my next question to you, because we also are trying to we also have a population cohort at an IBMG, and I know it's hard to get funding to maintain it for now. So what are your plans now that this project was up till 2022? Because now that you have that population cohort, it's going to be a waste if you just let it go. So how do you take that forward now?
Yeah, I mean, as you rightly said, that the Framingham Heart Study started sometimes in 1960s, and is still ongoing. Similarly, Rotterdam cohort is going for many years now. So it's always a good idea to invest into cohort studies which are long term, because it helps us generate the India specific data, So, but funding is always a challenge, and DBT was very kind. They gave us adequate funding, but the problem was that switching the heads, if you get funding in consumable heads more and you want to buy equipment, then your institutional policies or maybe the rules don't allow you, or the funding agency, you have to go again to the funding agency and say, okay, please reappropriate our budget, because once you estimate the budget proposal, then of course you cannot foresee many things, and once you actually do it, then you face challenges as far as funding is concerned. So when I say an inadequate funding, that I mean that switching the heads is a major challenge rather than having a big chunk of money for a cohort. So initially for this study, DBT committed for 8 years, but we are again trying to somehow convince DBT to give us some more time and funding to extend this project for say next couple of years, but not any positive news as yet. And as I said in my presentation, we should not depend on only one funding agency. We should also explore other resources so that we can have. I mean, it's always a good idea to have multiple projects under one cohort. If there are 20 investigators, maybe they can write 10 more projects and they can bring funding from ICMR, DHR, and all that places. So, but it's very easy to say than actually doing in practice. So right now we are trying to get extension for another couple of years, but as of now the project is completely stalled.
Yeah, I think even I don't know if you have data on COVID for the cohort that you already have. I think something along that might also be.
Because our data collection ended in 2019 and we were planning to have our follow-up in early January 2020, but then COVID happened in January 2020 and this all field work was stopped because of COVID, and we could not collect any data related to COVID other than having only telephonic follow-ups in the study. So COVID specific data as far as I know.
Thank you, Kamal. And Priyanki, for you, I'm sure managing so many different organizations together would have been must have is a task, I'm sure. So, what is did you have other research managers as at the organizations that you could kind of coordinate with, or was it directly with the PIs that you were getting in touch with?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. There isn't really a straightforward answer to that. It depended on who we were partnering with. So when we were with research institutes like ICER and NCL, yes, we would talk to the PIs or someone within the team. But when we looked at hospitals or labs, we would be talking to the coordinators who may or may not have done research projects before, and maybe they were the only people available to come to work or stay close enough to be able to work during COVID. So it was a blend of all sorts of people, and some of them who had work experience of what they were doing, and some who didn't. To give you a small example, we actually had a lab assistant in one of the labs who actually ended up helping us do a lot of coordination, because much higher up, whoever she reported to, all of them were sort of had moved back into their smaller towns and hometowns that during COVID and weren't in Pune. So it was a very different situation. You kind of had to make the best of who was there at that particular time. And also to sort of refer back to managing of multiple institutes and so on. I think this project was very unique because there were people invested in the outcome, and they realized the more data that was able to be generated through sequencing would help sort of track the situation of COVID. And I think that's what got a lot of people to proactively be part of this. So that's what I would think. So I think it's situational in this case. I'm not sure if it would be easily replicated to something right now.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Aradhita, there's a question for you in the chat box. So yes, to convince a CSR funder to fund public health research project is really is challenging, as they always look for the face of a community attached to their funding. What is your experience with the CSR funders in this context? How you were able to address this, unless for an implementation research project? So this is from Geeta Nambiar.
Thank you, Geeta. And I agree with you that to a certain extent, it does depend upon the phase of the community that it is attached to. But at the same time, it also depends upon your past track records or how you have been. How you have been performing in other projects, how you have been delivering them, what is your reporting, how well you have reported that, how well you have uh, dispersed it to the public at large, as well as shared your results and helped in simulation of your results with the funding agency themselves. Based on these, it does make an impact on the consideration of your project with the CSR. And I would say that there have been cases where people who have not had previous CSR funding from that particular person, I have pitched based on that PI's past record, based on IGIP's phase. So it's very necessary that the institute has a single point of phase where the other stakeholders are engaging with, so that they get to know how the institute is functioning and they sort of gain a trust on you, and then it's easier for you to make that pitch.
Thank you, Aradhita. Savita, do we have time for any more questions? We don't have anything in the chat box right now, but yeah.
We don't have anything in the chat box. So, Alpana, I was just thinking maybe we could all take a little bio break and reconvene maybe at 5:05. So just 5 minutes past 5, because we'll have the informal networking session. And so, if there are any further discussions around what Aradhita, Kamal, and Priyanki have presented, we can take that up at the informal networking as well.